My top priority is my faith, and this may be my first video that doesn't deal directly with faith or highlight any scripture, but I believe it's relevant because while it doesn't involve a Hollywood actor facing backlash for taking a Christian stance, as I covered with my previous videos on Kimberly Elise and Chris Pratt, and will eventually cover with Letitia Wright, it does involve a Hollywood actor facing backlash over expressing suspected right-wing sentiments. And oftentimes, we Black Americans fail to see the relevance of the suppression of right-wing expression because we so ardently align ourselves with the left. We overlook the fact that the left often lumps Christians in with the right, conservatives, Republicans, or Trump supporters. These are all one group to leftists. The What Do You Mean YouTube channel just did a great video responding to comments that left-wing talk show host Bill Maher made, not only aligning Christians with the criminals who stormed the Capitol, but he went so far as to declare that the reason why they stormed the Capitol was because they are presumably religious people. Mind you, Black Christians like Drs. Michael Eric Dyson and Cornel West were frequent guests on the show, often co-signing his left-wing ideologies. Black Christians tend to think, well, they're not talking about us because they use terms like evangelicals for white Christians and Protestants for Black Christians, even though there is virtually no difference between the definitions. But anyways, I've been a subscriber to Jody's Corner for years. The appeal of his channel is that he and his friends, the Just Us League, brought a fun, streetwise perspective to comic book-based entertainment. He recently shared his take on the firing of Gina Carano from the hit Disney Plus show The Mandalorian.
People are trying to say that Gina Carano used the beep boop bop to offend people who are trans or their identity or whatever it be. Me personally, I don't feel like Gina Carano was doing that. I don't think there was any malice in it. I think that people were trying to bully her into doing something she didn't want to do.
So far, he's agreeing with her, and even the article that he's referencing from The Independent, they acknowledge that it is ridiculing the convention rather than transgender people or the LGBT plus community at large. This stems from the notion that it's not obvious what gender some trans people would like to be acknowledged as, and to normalize that and support those particular trans people, they push this notion that it's not clear what gender anyone is. Thus, everyone should declare their preferred pronouns. They pushed Gina to add pronouns to her bio, and after plenty prodding, she added pronouns to her bio, but instead of putting she/her, indicating that she identifies as a female, she put beep bop boop, implying that she's an android, thereby mocking the convention and the notion that it's necessary for everyone to declare their pronouns, no matter how obvious their gender is. So again, Jody said he supported her through this controversy because he believes that no one should be pressured into participating in a convention that they choose not to. But later on in the video, he says he goes back and changed his mind.
And then I look back at this, the beep bop boop. You've ruined yourself because now I do believe you were probably making fun of the trans.
Discussing film, and others claim that Carano was comparing being a Republican with being a Jew in Nazi Germany. Personally, I didn't see anything indicating that she is a Republican. The post in question never mentions Republicans, or Democrats for that matter. It just poses the question, how is hating someone because they are different in terms of race different from hating someone who is different in terms of their political views? The post was not downplaying the wicked acts carried out by Nazi soldiers. It was a warning that justifying hate based on differences can have devastating consequences, as it did in Nazi Germany. According to Disney, Carano was fired because her social media posts denigrating people based on their cultural and religious identities are abhorrent and unacceptable, despite the fact that the point of the post was to warn people to avoid the intolerance that led to the denigration of Jews. The post was communicating that while we don't all agree on politics, we do mostly agree that we don't want to become anything like Nazi Germany, so let's avoid succumbing to the intolerance that allowed that fascist regime to rise to power, because it starts in how we view and treat those who are different from us. Jody claims that he doesn't talk politics on his channel, and I respect that, but he claims that this termination was not politically motivated. He's entitled to that opinion, but if he believes that it has nothing to do with politics, then why did Discussing Film claim that Gina compared being a Republican to being a Jew during the Holocaust when the post made no mention of Republicans? Why hasn't this tweet from a currently employed writer on the Black Panther comic yielded his termination? Why didn't Eternals actor Kumail Nanjiani face termination for his tweets which justified comparing Trump supporters to Nazis, based on his false equivalency between factoring immigrant crime rates into immigration policies to factoring Jewish crime rates into anti-Semitic policies? Why didn't the producer of the live-action version of Beauty and the Beast face termination for tweeting an illustration of quote-unquote MAGA kids being fed into a wood chipper? Why didn't the star of The Mandalorian, Pedro Pascal, face termination for tweeting a photo that was intended to compare apprehended children of illegal immigrants to Jews in Nazi Germany? For the record, his post wasn't even accurate. The photo of children was not of America in 2018. It was a 2010 photo of Palestinian children waiting to be fed soup that was donated to a soup kitchen. When James Gunn was fired for his litany of tweets joking about child abuse and sexual assault, Hollywood rallied to get him back, and Disney obliged. Why do you think that was? And speaking of James Gunn, he recently liked a tweet that celebrated Carano's canceling. It just amazes me how people who have been subject to cancel culture themselves can endorse it. Jody himself was targeted last year when people misconstrued his message. He mocked actor Ray Fisher for his repeated, vague complaints about his experience filming Justice League. Ray Fisher and others complained that Jody was homophobic for calling him Gay Fisher, when in fact, Jody called him Yay Fisher, implying that his rants had become Kanye-like.
Here it is, quote, "Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views?" So basically what you're saying is, oh, it wasn't the Nazis out here beating the Jews first. It was the government that started it. I said, yeah, that can't work. You know, this comment doesn't work. She's not saying that Nazis are excused. Nah, she's not exactly saying that. But then again, in my opinion, she's downgrading the evil that they were by saying, oh, because the Jews hated the other Jews, that allowed the Nazis to be Nazis.
That statement demonstrates that Jody misinterpreted the message that the post was communicating, because he differentiated Nazis from the government, when in actuality, the Nazis were the government. They were officers of the state. The post is pointing to the fact that most people recognize Nazis as bad, yet they dominated a nation less than 80 years ago. So where did all of these bad people come from? Well, at some point, they had to have been somewhat normal people who bought into bigoted, intolerant ideologies. So if we can't tolerate people with different political views, if we simply justify hating them, then we could be setting the ground to repeat the ugly history of Nazi Germany. Here's an excerpt from the Wikipedia page on fascism. It says, "The advent of total war and the total mass mobilization of society had broken down the distinction between civilians and combatants. A military citizenship arose in which all citizens were involved with the military in some manner during the war." So again, this is the distinction that the post was making. Not between Nazis and Jews, but between civilians and combatants. Germans en masse had to buy into this mob mentality. They had to become convinced that it was okay to oppress others based solely on differences. So while Jody and even Disney suggested that Gina's post was downplaying what Nazis did, it was actually the opposite. She was acknowledging that what happened was horrendous, and therefore we should try to avoid repeating that history.
Some people in Africa actually sold black people to the white men for there to be slaves. So what do we do with slavery? Do we not blame the slave masters for putting black people for slavery through over 400 years?
No, this is a separate issue, but it drives home my recurring theme that There's a difference between an informed opinion and a vain opinion. The fact that he said, as many do, that black people were put through slavery for over 400 years. If he's referring to the Atlantic slave trade in this country, it didn't last for 400 years. It didn't last 300 years. It lasted from 1619 to 1865, which is 246 years. Still a long time and still an ugly, horrendous tradition. But this is the problem. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but we have to share the facts, especially when opinions lead to real-life consequences. Emotions have to subside in order for justice to prevail. Remember to gather facts, gain knowledge, get truth.